A second tradition that we have, I'm very proud of our film team. I always look to them to see how well the podcasts get. They're still awake, so that's a good sign. They're great because they don't have our background. They're more in the creative area. In the film area, great people. Can highly recommend them if you need a film crew. But I always like to ask them if they have any questions of our guests, and they often come up with some of the best questions. Nelly, do you have any questions for our guest? So you're kind of alluding to the concept. The struggle that every new generation has is how do they harness their idealism, which is a huge potential for society. If we could just embrace the potential of every new generation that comes up and kind of holds us accountable for the things that philosophers have been telling us for hundreds, if not thousands of years, versus the wearing down, the cynicism that's often vomited up on every new generation to keep them low. Shut up and listen. You don't know enough yet. So your question is kind of as a light fund, as a guideline for the new generations that are coming up. What can they do to have their idealism have a bigger impact? Yeah.
That doesn't matter.
That's a very good question, which I think has a very simple answer to, right? So because we were talking here about what the leadership can do, right? And I could tell you, well, you're powerless, and that's a fact. So you can't really do much, right? And obviously, we have very indirect ways of influencing society. We go to vote for a certain party, and it's very little what we can do. But of course, we also know that we can change the world around us. So
influence is often stronger than power.
It is really like the world, the immediate world that is around you. You can, of course, influence. And I feel one of the most influential advice I got as a teenager once from a father of a friend of mine. He said, I wanted to change the world and I had these big ideas. I wanted to have a better world. And then he said, look, you can't influence the world. You can only influence, just imagine a radius of 1 kilometer around you, and that's what you can influence, but not more. Maybe within this kilometer there's your school and your friends. Beyond that, forget it. It's basically start there. Maybe it grows, and maybe you can really influence the world. And of course, today it's all virtualized and digitized, but it's still that circle. It's still not much bigger, even if maybe the different points of that circle are very far away. And so, what do we advise the leaders to do? Well, we advise them work on yourself, hone your skills. Work on your personality, work on your values, work on your habits, right? And that will change, because they are leaders, it will change the whole organization and our world. So that's exactly what you can do. You can do exactly the same thing. You can cultivate yourself. You can spend time on self-improvement. You can spend time on building your character and your values, and you can develop habits that make you into a person who will have an effect on the whole environment. My feeling is people who do that, and my observation, they will become leaders eventually, and then they will be.
Yeah, because they stand out, and I think that's what the society is looking for. Trust. They're looking for people, and leaders aren't born from one moment to the other. They have to build over. They have to aggregate over time. I think this goes back to this classical what Stephen Covey once talked about. We all are overwhelmed by our circle of interest. If we look at the news, we get depressed and then we feel like inconsequential in the world because we say our circle of power is, but our true benefit is in what we call the circle of influence, is we only have so much power, but we have so much potential. And I would disagree with you a little bit. I think absolute revolution in our society today, and that you would agree with me with, I'm sure what this is concerned, is social media gives us much, much more potential in having influence on people. And I think what I would tell young people is if inconsequential nincompoops can be influencers on social media, you can too. You can have influence with positive things. I think the most important thing is don't let people rob your enthusiasm. I think I'm going on 60 here now soon. I'm still proud of the fact that I have a lot of the idealism that I had when I was younger. I remember when I was about 16, I had this conversation with one of my teachers, and she looked at me and she says, Mark, everything you're saying is incredibly well thought through but very idealistic. And she said to me, this was her advice: wait till you're a little bit older and reevaluate that. And my counter answer was, if what I'm saying now has validity and purpose, why should it change just because I get older? I think there's a trade-off factor. Sometimes you have to learn new things that you didn't know about beforehand to create a better. Coming back to this, that decisions require multiple facets, multiple perspectives to come up with the right solution. I have a big hope in the new generations, and I hope that they become more active, and I hope that they don't lose their energy, and I hope that life doesn't tear them down. I agree with you. There is sometimes a little bit too much entitlement. I think we in our generation, we're also entitled to a certain extent, but there's a lot of potential there. Thanks.
I think maybe this point about being an idealist, right? I think when we get older, we do have to acknowledge that we learn more things, and it is to be expected that we change our opinion. Yeah. And as we accumulate negative experiences in a very dynamic world, maybe we become more cynical. And I can tell you about myself that I'm much more cynical than I used to be as a young person. And I have learned about the nature of man being really terrible. Mm-hmm. And I had a much higher opinion of human beings before. And yet, actually, that is only one step in the step of enlightenment. When you think it further, the question is, how do you react to that, right? And you can always say, okay, I'm a victim of the external circumstances. But as Viktor Frankl says, yes. Actually, as the Stoics already say, Epictetus says the same, you are in complete control of how you react to it. Yeah. So you can, and then that is, you can decide what your reaction is, and that means you can shape your own reality to a large extent. And of course, it is important what your reaction is. If your reaction is against cynical and I destroy myself, or escapism and what have you,
nihilistic.
Yeah. Then who am I to judge? Obviously, that is also a possibility. But as you pursue a path of self-improvement and of enlightenment, and of being and then listening to others, and this kind of broadening your horizon, you will see, well, the cynicism actually wears off, because among all these terrible people you will meet there, you will also meet some really great people who will inspire you and who will show you that they can do things.
And so really cynical you can't be if you still said that in this stage of your life, ethics and leadership is something that's important to you. So
that's how I react.
Good. Rico, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so I think I have an answer for you. So, sometimes I'm reminded of what was the world like 90 years ago or so, or 90, 100 years ago, when basically the 20s still okay, but then the 1930s, it got really dark in the world, right? And irrationalism and meanness and cruelty were the dominant factors in our world politics and in our society.
Or the status quo.
And then we descended into the abyss of the Holocaust and the one of the most destructive wars of mankind. So there's a descent to this kind of disaster right now, driven by exactly the factors that you mentioned. And I don't know if it's inevitable. I don't know if you can mitigate it. My gut feeling or my analysis tells me there's very little we can do about it. It's the zeitgeist, as we say, and we are going to descend into a new age of barbarism and brutality. And then we will afterwards, if we haven't destroyed our entire planet, we will wake up and we'll try to do it. We'll try again, like we did after the Second World War. We'll try to build up a new version. And I think it will be better than the previous one. And that's, I think, pretty much how the world goes.
So you're talking about cycles. I wouldn't see it quite that dark. I think it's your question is similar to Nellie's. I think the answer is you don't know what you really believe, what you really believe, until your beliefs are challenged. So if you are against bullying, how do you deal with it? So it goes back to that Viktor Frankl or Epictetus thing. We don't have a choice of all the things that happen to us, the inputs that we get, but we do have an ultimate choice of how we deal with them. And I think in the sense of cynicism is, do we stick to our team, or do we join the others because we don't see a purpose or in believing what we believe anymore? I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. And I think what we should always remember is that also in times of darkness, if you want light, light a match, light a candle, and that match or candle might seem like an inconsequential thing. That's you. Okay, I believe in the sense of system theory, a swarm theory. I think we as individuals might not be as powerful as we think, but we're much more influential than we think. And the question is, are we willing to burn for what we believe in? I think that's ultimately the fuel behind ethics and leadership. And I agree with you. I think ultimately, I think Winston Churchill once said about the American population, you can apply this to, Winston Churchill once said about Americans, you can count on American people, always count on them doing the right thing after they've tried everything else. That is unfortunately the learning process in the cycle of history. Unfortunately, history repeats itself often, but I think I'm positive in the sense that there's, with enough consciousness and awareness of individuals that hold up against it, I think we have a good chance. So I want to leave on a light note. Sascha, I want to say thanks a lot for this extended conversation. I'm sure we could have gone on quite some more time. Maybe we'll have an opportunity to revisit it once you've finished your work in fall. Thanks a lot for entertaining our viewers and spectators. If you have questions, or you're interested in Sascha's services, or you want to contribute, or you have great cases, or you're interested in his survey process and his metrics, we'll put his contact information in the space below. Sascha, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.